A new peer-reviewed antibody study shows the coronavirus infection rate could be 50 to 80 times more widespread than previously believed, dropping the mortality rate to a microscopic 0.12, potentially 0.2. While that is still higher than the common flu, it is, well, comparable. At 0.2, it's around twice as lethal as your typical flu. So it's still bad. And there's a few things that should be pointed out. Hospitalization still remains high, presumably higher than we expect for the flu. But when you factor in this antibody test showing that more people have this than we realize, the percentage shifts dramatically. Now, here's the scary thing. I'm not going to tell you what's true and what isn't. But if this study is to be believed, and we do need more, it stands to reason we shouldn't have shut anything down. Now, the weird thing is where all these deaths coming from, people are still dying a lot, substantially more than normal, which is why I don't believe this study is accurate. What you need to understand about any survey study or, control group, whatever, is that static and noise exist. This is why I don't like using single polls for the president's approval. I like using the aggregate. You'll see like 5 polls all say Trump has 50% approval, and then one will appear saying it's at 80. Yeah, well, that could be statistical noise based on a sample being, good or bad. So in which case, you actually want to average them out. Get rid of the noise. We have one study so far. And of course, people are jumping on it saying, boom, there it is, just like the flu. But this doesn't account for all of the deaths we've seen. In New York City, for instance, deaths are around double their daily, average. So people are dying from something. If it's not coronavirus, I don't know what it is, and that'd be freaky. But let's read the story and see what they say. The Daily Caller reports, Stanford University research teams released data Friday from the nation's first widespread community test for COVID-19 antibodies, and the results show the virus's spread could be far wider than previously believed. The study, conducted by 2 research teams who tested 3,300 Santa Clara County, California volunteers, found that 2.5 to 4.2% of those tested were positive for antibodies, a number suggesting a far higher past infection rate than the official count. In the county of almost 2 million people, researchers believe the virus could have infected between 48,000 and 81,000 people. On April 1st, when the samples were gathered, the county had 958 reported cases. The study has yet to be peer-reviewed. Okay, so it's yet to be peer-reviewed. No, I think Fareed Zakaria said it was pre-peer-reviewed. Okay, so it's not peer-reviewed. All right. So there's a clarification. I want to show you what Fareed Zakaria says, too, because, he's CNN. And with all of the ragging on CNN I've done this today in the past several days, I thought it would be good to highlight what they say because it corroborates a conservative outlet like Daily Caller. They said, our findings suggest that there is somewhere between 50 and 80-fold more infections in our country than what's known by the number of cases that are reported by our Department of Public Health. Stanford Associate Professor of Medicine and study leader Dr. Aaron Ben-David told ABC News anchor Diane Sawyer in an interview. Ben-David pointed out that even an over 4% infection rate means the vast majority of people have not been infected with the virus, calling the decision to reopen the U.S. economy a very difficult choice. But if the mortality rate is that low, well, then we're dealing with the flu? I don't know. Ben-David pointed out, all right, I read that. We have good confidence that we're getting reliable information on the population, he said. And that can be done because we know what proportion of the people who are positive. We know what proportion of the people who are positive were missing using this test. Researchers reportedly set up 3 drive-through sites around the country and took finger pricks of blood from volunteers who were recruited using targeted online advertising. The ABC News report included a cautionary word from epidemiologist Dr. John Brownstein, who noted that online ads used to recruit subjects could skew the pool and that one county isn't necessarily representative of the rest of the U.S. population. However, Brownstein said the research adds to this confirmation of what we've expected, which is a large number of cases that we never anticipated. There has been wide recognition that we were undercounting infections because of a lack of testing or patients were asymptomatic, Brownstein told the outlet. Meanwhile, a smaller sample of 374 tests administered in Johnson County, Kansas, showed a 3.8% infection rate, a result on the upper end of the Stanford study numbers. It looks like we now have 2 different studies showing more people are infected than we realize. And this is significant, Fareed Zakaria says. When in a tweet, first U.S. random sampling of a population was done in Santa Clara County, California last week to find out how many people here have COVID, and thus the actual fatality rate. Results of the peer-reviewed study. Number of infected are 50 to 85 times more than currently counted. This infection fatality rate is 0.12 to 0.2, which is much lower than previously assumed. And that is CNN's Fareed Zakaria tweeting it out. I shouldn't have to highlight Fareed Zakaria when I do a video like this. But of course, if I don't, and I don't show you my sources, you will have operatives from angry activist groups trying to claim that I was downplaying these things. In fact, I believe Fareed and the study, they're both wrong. I do believe the infection rate is likely higher. But if that's the case, the mortality rate is comparable to the flu, why are we seeing so many deaths compared to the average of, last year? It doesn't add up. It actually makes more sense that the studies, at least the one study, was skewed, and that it's not accurately showing how many people were truly infected. I mean, look, they're saying they had 950 reported cases, and they believe it could be like 80,000 people actually being infected. Fareed says this is why we need more testing. Interestingly, another Twitter user verified, Vincent Rajkumar. He is the Edward W. and Betty Knight Scripps Professor at the Mayo Clinic, editor, Blood and Cancer, etc. He says, come on, you cannot look at those numbers in isolation. This is not what many other studies find. The math doesn't add up. This is not what happened in Diamond Princess. I would be very careful saying mortality is that low. I don't think it is. And he brings up a really great point. I would love to take this study and say, I think the mortality is low, but I really don't. The Diamond Princess saw massive, really high mortality. And these other isolated places, we've seen this spread and it gets bad and people get put on ventilators. Krishna Stay Home Komenduri, who is Chief Division of Transplantation and Cellular Therapy at the Sylvester Cancer Center, looks like, said, remember that the same logic holds up for the flu. The last 2 times I got influenza through contact with children with confirmed test positive cases, I wasn't tested and therefore wouldn't have been in the CFR denominator. Most people who have flu aren't tested or listed, seemingly pushing back, saying maybe these numbers are accurate. If the amount of deaths are twice what we see from the flu, maybe that explains why we're seeing twice the number of deaths. I don't know if that justifies the lockdown. Maybe it doesn't, whatever. I'll leave that to you guys to decide. But we are seeing substantially more deaths. So if the mortality rate is 0.2, double the flu, it makes sense. What this dude's basically saying, and he's right, is that all of these people who might get mild symptoms, might get a sniffle, might get a cough, they don't think twice. I mean, I remember a couple months ago, I was coughing for a day or two. Is it possible that I actually had it? I mean, I really doubt it because I'm kind of a homebody. You may have noticed I'm here all the time. But there's a lot of people who might have had a cough or a sniffle and they ignored it. And it was mild to say the least. So they don't get tested, they don't care, and they carry on with their lives. If that's the case and the infection rate's really high, then many of these there's what they were saying in one study, like 50% of people could be asymptomatic, meaning they have no symptoms of this. If those people are spreading it around, then what we need to consider is that some people are going to get sick. Of those people who get sick, 0.2% will die. Or I'm sorry, some people will have it. And of those who get infected, 0.2% will die. Then maybe we have to reopen the economy. And maybe we are spooked by our own shadow a bit too much. Maybe the numbers coming out of China are actually right. I don't think I'll end up trusting them. But if the mortality rate isn't really that bad, then maybe everything was overhyped. Now, I know there's a lot of conservatives who want to believe this, and they've wanted to believe it for the whole time. So be careful about confirmation bias. We have 2 studies so far. One with a smaller sample size. People have pushed back saying it doesn't really make sense. And I got to say, I don't like using one study. Even 2 is not necessarily enough. I think it's fair to point out locking down the economy and these authoritarian rules may have been a stretch too far. But think about the upside. I mean, look, we took a precaution. We were let's say these numbers are accurate. Then maybe we were too heavy-handed. I mean, think about all the other diseases that are going to get severely crippled because we all locked ourselves in our homes. I'm not saying that we should be happy that we destroyed the economy. Not at all. I mean, that's really, really bad. I'm just saying, look, bad things happened. People lost their lives. We decided to lock down. We're going to learn from this. Whatever we learn, We can't look back and regret everything we did, because hindsight is 2020. If we now learn it wasn't that bad, that's great. That's great. And there are some positives to look at for everything that happened. I know for the most part, still a net negative, but we can focus on the good. We'll see how things play out. This is one study so far. You got people like CNN's Fareed Zakaria pointing this out. So I'm highlighting him on purpose. YouTube's still going to demonetize this. You know how it works, but I guess we'll see. So I'll leave it there. Stick around. I got one more segment coming up for you in a few minutes, and I will see you all shortly.